you. Hello, I'm Elaine Petrocelli from Book Passage, and I'm so happy to welcome you today to this event that I have been looking forward to celebrate Peggy Knickerbocker's absolutely gorgeous book, Love Later On. When I say it's gorgeous, I mean, you can, well, of course I can't find the page right now. There are the most beautiful paintings in this book. They're just incredible. And I was thinking, gosh, I don't want to hurt the book, but I could frame some of these paintings. And I'm sure Peggy will tell us a little bit more about them. But this book about meeting finally the right person late in life is beautiful, but it's also a memoir of Peggy's life. And I started reading it, and I was supposed to be making dinner for 6 people, and I forgot. And that's how good it is. So do not miss Love Later On, this absolutely magnificent book. I'm so excited that Peggy is going to be joined today by 2 of my personal favorite people. Armistead Maupin, who in my younger days had me reading the Chronicle every minute. I started out when he introduced us to Marianne Singleton on at the Pacific Sun, and then he came with a daily column at the Chronicle, and I could those Tales of the City were just and still are absolutely fantastic. In fact, we are still selling Tales of the City and all of the volumes of it, all the way to When Mrs. Madrigal Goes to Burning Man. And I love Armistead's own memoir, Logical Family, a memoir. Do not miss this. It is so much fun to read and has so much depth to it, like Peggy's book. I mean, a lot of people write memoirs. These memoirs are amazing. And Book Passage's great friend, Anne Lamott, who is always there for me, whose latest book is Dusk, Night, Dawn, but whom I met 44 years ago when I called her on the phone to try to figure out how to get hard laughter. She's been there for me ever since. And so I'm really excited to sit back and listen to these 3 amazing writers and absolutely fabulous human beings who have all found love later on. Thank you. Annie, will you take it from here?
Thank you, Elaine. That was wonderful. We are all passionate supporters of Book Passage. We are at your service. I can't think, I don't want to get distracted, but I can't think of another bookseller really in America who has done more for writers, local writers, and writers from all over the world who weren't getting the kind of attention that they deserved. And so thank you. And I am so happy to be here. Peggy is my really darling, darling sister. She's my son's godmother and came home with me from the hospital to take care of me and Sam for a week. What's his name? Oh, you know who I mean. And but we first met in a bar in North Beach, probably Tosca. We had mutual friends, so we go back 40 years, and we both loved a little social cocaine every few hours for many, many years. And we were both hopeless drunks, and we've both been clean and sober 35 years or so now. Peggy maybe 36. In fact, I remember one of the reasons I got sober was there used to be the question man. Remember Armistead in the car?
Oh, yeah.
And it had little postage-sized pictures of people. And one of the questions was, what is the best new habit you've developed, or something like that? And there was a postcard, a postage stamp size picture of Peggy. And Peggy said, well, I got sober 8 months ago, so maybe that's my best new habit. And I thought, my mouth dropped literally to my chest. And I thought, Peggy Knickerbocker got sober? Oh my God. And so I got, remember, and so we can tell drunk stories about Peggy, but I got sober not long after, because I figured if Peggy Knickerbocker could get sober, anyone could get sober. And we have been in like daily contact ever since. So, and then Armistead and I go back even farther to my early 20s, which is 40, I think we go back like 46 years. when Rosalie Wright, who started Women's Sports Magazine and then who ended up being the editor at the Chronicle and then New West Magazine, brought us together. And of course, it was instant love. Although then one thing the three of us shared, going back so many years, was some real fixer-upper boyfriends. And I'm not going to name names. And I know you've forgiven, both of you have forgiven all the wrong choices, but being a Christian, forgiveness is not my strong suit. I'm Reformed, but I'm not going to mention either of your awful choices here today. But just to begin and to get the focus on love later on Peggy's book, Peggy, I love you so much, so much. Will you just tell everyone how and why, how you met Robert and how and why you wrote this book?
Sure. Thank you, Andy, for all that, all those compliments. I met Robert. I was the happiest person in the world in 1907. And I thought, I don't need a man. I am a popular woman. I have everything I need. And boom, I met him. And that's the trick. I think that's what we need to do, is just to be the happiest, most cheerful, doing everything we want, anything at all. And then if you kind of secretly do want somebody, that's the moment you'll meet him or her. So that's what happened. And he arrived in the middle of the night with hundreds of bags of presents and like iPhones. We hadn't met, we talked on the phone. I met him through his best friend and my best friend. I mean, my oldest friend and his oldest friend, I must say. And so he came and I was exhausted and I just didn't know what else to do except to say, well, I kind of have to go to bed. Let's go to bed. he had a room at a hotel, but it just was the easiest thing to do. And then we just got together. He kind of wouldn't leave me alone. We had 478 emails before we met. And he asked me to marry him before we met, as he was driving on a freeway in LA. And so we finally did meet. We worked it all out. And I thought it was time for him to meet my family. So I hadn't told him I loved him or that I would marry him. Do you want me to read the little passage about that?
Oh, I'd love it if you did.
Okay.
Yes.
And so I felt a deep connection to Robert on the drive home from Calistoga, where my brother lives. A light fog had rolled in over the vines, mustard flowers. Their greens and yellows became a splashy blur. I remember what I cooked that night, a blue cheese souffle with a green salad. As I whipped the egg whites, I felt as sure as I ever feel about Robert. My senses were alert as I worked in the kitchen, my focus clear. I knew exactly how to proceed. Before bed, I would tell Robert Fisher that I loved him. We climbed into bed soon after dinner to read the paper. When it came time to turn out the lights, Robert sat on the side of his bed. The moon was almost full, making the water gleam. I felt so relaxed and drowsy, I could barely keep my eyes open. He leaned over to kiss me goodnight and whispered, I love you, Peggy Knickerbocker. Gone to the world, I mumbled, I love you too, Robert Schneider. Then I closed my eyes. Happy I finally said it. Robert Schneider? Who the fuck is Robert Schneider? He shouted. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word at 5 years old, but I did. Anyway, he stood up, very agitated, then slumped back down on the bed, forlorn. Wide awake, I sat up in bed trying to make sense of what had happened. I have no idea why I said that. I don't know where that came from. You mean you don't know Robert Schneider? I think you better act fast to explain this one. Meanwhile, words started pouring out of me, anything I could think of. Robert Schneider's an old friend. He was Flicka's and my first chef at Pier 23 back in the mid-'80s. On the day of his interview, he wore glasses with pale blue frames, just like mine, and a black and white herringbone overcoat, also just like mine. I knew I was sputtering, but I didn't want to stop until I made everything clear. I wanted to hire him on the spot. He prepared a meal for us, and I loved his French California style of cooking. Yes, Peggy, Robert impatiently interrupted me. But why did you invoke his name at our most significant romantic moment? It's just what I told you. Robert Schneider and I are old colleagues. That's all. Well, that's very nice, but it doesn't explain why you said I love you, Robert Schneider. I happened to think of him when I was making a souffle. I know this will get me in just a little bit deeper, but the last souffle I made was for him a few months ago. That's why he must have flashed into my mind. Peggy, this is just getting worse and worse. Oh, I forgot to mention one important thing. He's gay. Really, Robert said. He has never been a romantic interest. Even this didn't satisfy Robert. Haven't you told me that some of your gay friends have had children with women to whom they were formerly married? And it goes on. And then I went to a party, an opening of a restaurant in Oakland, and everybody I met, I introduced Robert as Robert Schneider. I was like having Tourette's. I couldn't stop doing it. So then I introduced him to a friend of mine, Gilbert, who owns Zuni Cafe. And I said Robert Schneider. He didn't really know his name. And then he said, well, I know Peggy really well because we traveled together in Paris and China together. And then Robert, when he left, Robert said, so you traveled alone with the handsomest man in the whole room? So anyway, it went on and on.
Oh, that's so funny. Armistead, we all met the man we love way later on, the man we all ended up marrying. You married Christopher in 2007, 2006?
Yeah, I was 60.
Oh, God. And you were the youngest of the three of us. So, but why don't you tell us about how you met Christopher?
I met him on the street. It was a kind of a combination modern internet thing and the old-fashioned cruise. He walked past me at 18th and Castro, and I was so turned on by this beautiful blue-eyed young man, brunette, and who seemed to be looking at me in a way that indicated something. And I said to him, very cool, didn't I see you on a website? This was when that was a very unique idea to me, that you could see somebody on a website. And he said, what is it? And I said, daddyhunt.com. And it happened. He owned the website. He had created the website.
Oh.
And so there was no doubt in my mind. I had the usual insecurity for an older person is the younger person is in it for some ulterior motives. His ulterior motive was he likes old men.
Uh-huh.
And as I told him, I was overqualified for that position. So I stopped him on the street when I saw him and gave him my phone number. And he gave me his, and he says I never called him. Well, I think it must have to do with the fact that I had the flu then. I came down, I got really sick, and I didn't want him to see me that way.
Where were you where were you when you met?
Where physically when we met?
Yeah.
18th and Castro.
Oh, how funny. Had he read your work before?
Yes, but not devotedly. I was happy to see.
Yeah, I know. And that Neil had only read Bird by Bird when we met. I had 18 other books out, but tell us about you and Peggy. Where did you meet?
Peggy and I met, I guess the first time we met was in Newport. I mean, wasn't it, Peggy?
Yeah, it was.
She came out, you and Jay were not married yet.
No.
Were they? No. But she was dating my dear friend, Jay Hanna, who was in the Navy with me. And we had, with two other ensigns, had rented the Vanderbilt stable in Newport. It was a funky old apartment house, but it was out there in the pretty part of Newport. And I have this memory of us having one of our barbecues, which just usually involved putting a gross piece of steak on the barbecue and standing out there with beers and until we were kind of plastered. And Peggy, I remember seeing you in that location. And I can't say that Peggy and I really, I mean, I didn't immediately take to her because I thought she was kind of a junior leaguer. I mean, I got that vibe, and I was already rebelling from that in my own life.
She always had such beautiful haircuts too. I think that might have thrown you off.
She was always well-groomed.
Beautiful haircuts, yeah.
But she took care of me she and Jay took care of me when I arrived in San Francisco, when I got back from Vietnam. And we went to a party together out at Seacliff, a wedding party for
Mariah Boone.
Mariah Boone?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I remember that? Wasn't it a Townsend or something?
Maybe. It was at the Boone's house.
Oh, it was at the Boone's house, yes, where Robin Williams later lived.
Right.
Anyway, it was a wonderful evening for me because I remember a guy hearing that I was just back from Vietnam, a straight guy, who wrapped his arms around me and gave me this big hug and said, "I'm so glad you're back. I'm so glad you're alive." And that was a very San Francisco thing to do. And so I've never forgotten that evening.
Yeah. And then you and
Peggy and Jay, we went down you were working at Duncan McAndrew then? Is that right? Yeah. You fitted me for a jacket. I'd like to say I still have it, but it stopped fitting me years ago.
And then you two were off and running.
Yeah.
I'll tell you how I met Neil. When I got married 2 years ago, 3 days after I got Medicare. I was briefly 2 years older than him because his birthday's 3 months after mine, but he's a whole year younger. So he's 15 months younger. So the first thing that happened, and I think this is important for people listening who are wondering how it might happen for them too, which was I started to feel, I had like a really bad week with the people I'm closest to, my son, even my grandson and my older brother, who's a fundamentalist Christian. We're all here. Everybody's on the same piece of property. And I just felt like I was the flight attendant to the world. And I was just making sure everybody's needs were met, Sam and his little one and my brother. And I just eventually hit critical mass. And I told my brother I really felt crazy and awful and depleted and kind of bitter. And he came at me with some sort of Christian bumper sticker saying, God never gives you more than you can handle. And I felt like stabbing him in the head with a fork like a baked potato. And so I said, okay, I have to leave this right this second. I got in the car And I just started shouting and crying about having lived for 62 years like that, taking care of everyone and being and always eating the broken egg yolk, which my English mother had taught me, that the girl or the woman always eats the broken fried egg yolk, and lest the men have to suffer the pain of a broken fried egg yolk. And I got in the car and I cried all the way out to, and shouted and hit the steering wheel and was hoarse all the way out to Samuel P. Taylor Park, which is 25 minutes, and all the way back. And then I finally pulled over and I called my mentor, Horrible Bonnie, and I was not cute crying. I was red-faced, snotty, and I just said, I hate everyone. I hate all. And she said, she listened, and then she said, Annie, this is what we paid for, because she's been my mentor for 35 years. And she said, this is so great. And I said, I'm so lonely and all I do is take. And she said, the reason you can't be with a good man is because you're not your own priority. And as soon as you become your own priority, you're going to meet a man for whom you're going to be his priority. And I stopped crying and I breathed, and I think I had a real Coca-Cola, not a diet one. So that was pretty wild. And then I went home and I was fine. And I kind of did this actively falling in love with myself and spoiling and babying myself and putting lotion on my cellulite thighs and going, oh my God, you are such a delicious woman. And 2 months later, I met Neil on Match. And I'd already turned him away because I thought he was handsome. He's very smart, very spiritual, but he was allergic to cats. And of course, cats are my whole life, and except for the dogs. So I just didn't really need, it's like what Peggy was saying. I was really happy. I didn't really want, it was our time for slightly older, less young people. And I didn't really need anyone desperately. And then I saw this handsome, bright, brilliant, spiritual guy. And I wrote to him, I said, I just love your profile. He said, you already rejected me. I don't think I was Jesus-y enough for you. And so then I said, I'm just worried about the cats. And he said, well, if you put brewer's yeast, nutritional yeast in the kibble, I won't be allergic to your cat anymore. And I thought, well, he's either got a manuscript he wants me to read and blurb and send to my agent, or he wants to get into my pants. And so I said, I might be able to have a cup of coffee with you. That's as far as I can go. And I have never not been with him on any single day since. That's 5 years ago, unless one of us was out of town. But I think, Peggy, what you said is just so important, that you were the happiest you'd ever been, that your needs were fulfilled, that you weren't like out there with your, night vision goggles on. And you were available, but you weren't like, a truffle hound. And so I think God probably looked through her Rolodex and said, well, there's this guy in LA, his wife passed a year ago, and he's lovely, really, in every way. They're both a little bit beaten up by life currently, but I wonder. And then the next thing you know, he's on your steps with like 2 tote bags, probably one from Book Passage, full of presents. And Armistead, I wonder what kind of shape you were in at 18th and Castro when you passed by this. How old was he, by the way, and when you passed him by?
He was 32.
Yeah, so you were 20 years older.
And I was 20 years older. I was almost 60 at that point.
Yeah. And what?
And I was very much of the same mind. I was kind of content. I had suffered for a long time, being separated from someone, being divorced, essentially.
Yeah.
And had lived in that quagmire.
Yeah.
That what's wrong with me quagmire.
Right.
And then I just kind of gradually healed and came out of that. And I think that had me mentally prepared to meet someone else.
Yeah. I know when you see somebody who is empty and kind of full of Swiss cheese on the inside, who's hoping to meet someone to fill up the Swiss cheese, boy, that gives off a vibe that you probably don't want to draw close to yourself, but you meet somebody and when Sam was about 10, 9 or 10, really. He said, Mom, vibe is everything. And I think it's true, 25 years later, I think it's true. And if somebody's vibe is that they're walking along, enjoying the day, and they're grateful for what they do have. They're grateful for how beautifully they've come through the hardest things. Then God knows we have all been through real nightmares. I mean, an entire decade in the 80s and during the AIDS pandemic. And what Peggy and I had been through, what we've been through. And yet for someone to walk along who's grateful for all the blessings and tender mercies and what they've come through and what they are still left with, it's like some magical magnetic energy that attracts people to you, that Christopher didn't look at you and go, oh, nice to see you, Mr. Maupin, love your work, and keep moving, He stopped and took a second glance. So do you have any questions that you had thought about asking Peggy today? About the book especially?
Well, mostly I wanted the details on Robert.
Yeah, tell us about Robert.
But what I love about the book, I just want to say to Peggy, is that it's the very essence of her. I mean, her fascination with food and a tiny detail of decor. And when other people write about that sort of thing and it seems kind of bougie or classless, Peggy, it comes from a genuine joy of life, I love that about your work, Peggy.
Yeah.
And it makes you want to keep on reading. And let's talk about Karen Barber's illustrations.
Yeah.
Because they're just amazing. And that's another family connection there.
Yeah.
She's a dear friend to all of us.
Yeah. And when Elaine was talking about wanting to cut up the book somehow without ruining it, every single one of Karen Barber's illustrations in the book is worthy of being framed.
I know. I thought the same thing. I had the same vulgar thought.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites. She always does birds.
Yeah.
I have a pink bird. I've just moved, and that's why you're all in my bedroom. And I was trying to have my view behind me, but it just didn't work out very well.
And what's it been like being married to Robert? I mean, first of all, we were all young, but we were pretty well cooked by the time we met our husbands. We had, let's say, tiny control issues, and that we were pretty set in our own ways. We like things a certain way. We eat certain things pretty regularly. And so, Peggy, what was it like for you? What was it like meeting and falling in love and bringing Robert fully into your life?
Well, the book, instead of being a memoir of my life, is really a memoir of our first year together.
Yes.
And I really didn't want to write any more about food. I kind of had it, and I love writing about it. I love food. I love to eat. But I'd had it, and it's a younger person's game, and I just felt like doing something else. So every day I started just writing something, and like Robert would say, I make really thin, crispy chocolate chip cookies, and he'd say, do you ever make nice, fat, chewy chocolate chip cookies? And I'd say, no, I don't. And his deceased wife was a really good cook. And I'd say, did Bonnie make them that way? And he'd say, yes. I said, well, just every time you have a bite of mine, think of hers. And he said, maybe sometime you could make double baked mashed potatoes. And I said, that's not the way I cook. I'm a California girl. And so our food, our eating, he was meat and potatoes, and food was really one of the big deals in my life. So that took a little organizing, and he loved clothes, and he was just bought tons of clothes. Thank God he bought a lot of clothes for me. But, you know, I've been a hippie. I've grown up in the Haight-Ashbury. Armistead didn't meet me then, but I had long hair. I had a lot of, you know, that was my life. It was North Beach. It was the Haight, and he only had one woman that he'd been with, and he saw his wife on a diving board, and he married her 8 years later, and he was, you know, married when she died, and he really didn't have any other romance. And, you know, he always asked me how many people, and I said, absolutely, I would never tell you, no, but. You know, so that was really hard. His jealousy was unbelievable. And it wasn't, you know, a sweet little jealousy. It was intense. And then he'd say, well, you didn't tell me about that man. And I just forgot, you know, I couldn't help myself. So, you know, that was really the big difference. Oh, and he liked Celine Dion. And that just helped me. And take that off your iPod. And, you know, there were some big differences.
There have to be for it to be interesting.
Yeah.
I think.
What's the biggest difference you and Christopher slogged your way through Armistead?
Well, I just finished watching an hour of a sci-fi movie, which he loves. He loves sci-fi, and I have to be talked into it. Every time. But we don't have a lot. We discovered, it felt really good to be in lockdown with him here. We're in London, by the way, for people who are curious as to why it's dark here. And we moved here, just decided to pick up and move 2 years ago. Took a lot of work, but we did it. And it was, I was thinking that's the real test of a partner, if you can take on a brand new adventure together and let it be yours, you know, whatever it is. You're going to be having that, Peggy, with this new house.
Yeah.
Yeah, Neil and I have so many differences. I mean, I eat like Peggy does. I was born and raised in Marin County. I eat fruit and vegetables, and I binge and stuff, and I have a terrible sweet tooth, but for the most part, I really eat kind of, I mean, I could easily be a vegetarian, you know, but I love fish and chicken sometimes. Neil goes to Costco and he brings home pork roast the size of like Peggy's dog Lovey, you know, and he'll cook these pork roasts, and we'll have pork roast for 4 nights. And then he loves black and white old movies. And like you said about sci-fi, I can be talked into them. But what I'll say is, well, Neil, it's International Annie Lamott Day, and so tonight we're going to watch my choice of a movie. Or I'll say, Neil, it's Neil Allen Day, and tonight you can pick the movie, and it can be a black and white movie from the early 40s. And so we trade off that way. But the whole time his movie's playing, I'm kind of secretly checking my phone. And
yeah.
But the main thing that we have in common is just our heart. You know, the Venmo diagram is of a heart that is just full of.
Not so secretly.
Neil says, not so, he spoke to Seth and said, not so secretly am I on the phone when he's watching his black and white movie. But anyway, I found lockdown, I mean, my second year of marriage was in lockdown, which I don't remember in the vows. So it was mostly like 90% really fun and easy. And then, you know, I'd hear him chewing his bacon. He thought of bacon, really crunchy, crispy bacon. And I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to have a nervous breakdown if I have to hear him eat bacon for one more minute. And, but then he's so, I know this is true of both of your guys too. He is so hilariously generous with me. It's like the first man I've ever been with who takes care of me. You know, I've always been the not just the bank, but the taker care of, the flight attendant. I've always kind of put a lot of energy into making sure they were happy. And it's the first man I've ever been with who takes care of me. And it's pretty equal. I mean, I obviously take a lot of care of him. But Peggy, what was marriage during lockdown like for you and Robert?
It was so wonderful. Every time I say that, I think of all the people that died and were gasping for air, and
I know.
all of the people. And I hate to say it, but I remember calling a friend and saying, "I'm looking out of my window and there's no sound. There were no no cars, no cable cars." And I just went out with Lovey, my dog, and I took walks with my friends. I went to the market and I just loved it. I loved having no dates. I loved having my last book that I won a James Baird Award for was called Simple Soirees, and it was about entertaining. And I really don't like to have people over. I mean, you guys, I love having over. But, and it was just so great. It was just quiet. And, well, you get into a daily rhythm that's sort of the way we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so did we.
Yeah.
We can walk the dog down to Clapham Common and never worry about a car. And then suddenly he's got this massive area of green there to run on.
Yeah.
And it's sort of reduced everything to a very manageable level.
Yeah.
I called it COVID college because it really, so much was taken away, but what remained was really the only stuff that matters, each other and being of service. Like, I was really brokenhearted by all the footage on TV of the food pantries, of families lining up for 3 hours to get a sack or two of food for their kids. So I've put my passion into trying to help the food pantries. But it taught us everything that is beautiful that I think maybe our parents forgot to mention, because my focus was on succeeding and being an incredibly charming conversationalist when the parents' best friends were around, and having people esteem me and blah blah blah. They didn't teach me about quiet. They didn't teach me about sitting and spacing out. In fact, when I was a child, if you spaced out, a grown-up always came along and said, "Don't you have anything to do?" The first lesson I teach my writing students every year at Book Passage is space out more, waste more paper, and waste more time and space out more. But so the stuff that we learned, was that that we had so many armored habits, and I was raised in such a way that armored habits were part of forward thrust and doing better and keeping things under control and whatnot. And everything kind of fell by the wayside during COVID college. And we learned about just the blessings and sweetness of ordinary life. And I just say, hooray for ordinary life. Nothing more beautiful. And I loved it. And you couldn't race around importantly like we used to do before with these long to-do lists. You couldn't do it because you couldn't go in, especially because we were older and so a little bit more at risk. You couldn't race around crazily anymore. Wow, what a miracle to have that taken off of our, taken away from us, and instead getting a few things done, helping a few people who were stuck or poor, or the food pantry people, keeping it so simple. Oh my God. And paying better and better and better attention to what was right outside your door. The daffodils.
One of the things that I felt, because I had been single for a long time, is that I felt so lucky to have Robert, because I have lots of single women friends. And that's who I wanted to have over the most, because, some of them have kids, some of them don't, but they're also some of the most interesting people, both Robert and I know, but that really got me. And I just thought, I want to cook for them. And then when you're talking about being quiet, I once went and visited Armistead when he lived in New Zealand for a holiday, Christmas holiday. And he had these great pink and lavender caftans that he wore.
Night shirts.
That's right.
And he'd go out to his lawn and he'd have a big watering thing and he'd just stand out there. He was probably a little stoned too. But
Probably.
he'd stand out there and just think. And then I'd walk into a room and he'd just be looking out of the window. And I didn't know, I just didn't ever want to interrupt his thoughts. But I loved that about him. And it made it okay for me to be like that.
I love the fact that when you arrived, I think you'd been there half a day before you came in and said, "You've got all this watercress down in your pond." We had no idea we had watercress. And then you were harvesting it and we made pizza.
Oh, that's right. Watercress pizza.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's so funny. You know, it's like when so much of this busyness and efficiency and kind of clawing and scratching your way ever upward in the publishing world is taken away, you really discover the sacrament of puttering, you know? Oh. Everybody got a couple of terrible drawers done and cleaned out. And just to putter, like once I remember, Peggy, I was at your house years ago, and you and Robert were in those fabulous chairs, those matching chairs in your little living room with 2,000 books. And I wasn't married. I wasn't with Neil at the time. And I said, "So do you guys just kind of go from room to room being married together?" You looked at each other and you said, "Yeah." We might be in the living room. We might be in the kitchen. You know, we might be upstairs. Then we go back to the living room because it's really easy for Lovey to get up on the, you know. And I thought, God, what a concept, just to go from room to room, lots of books and the current New Yorker on the coffee table and some odd Peggy, low-fat, incredibly crisp, delicious snack. And, you know, I think that's what heaven will be like, is to have each other, to be kind of puttering, to be quiet, to have a view, and to have like delicious snacks in the most recent New Yorker. That will do it for me. So
I think we've all got some variation on that.
Yeah.
What a surprise, you know, after all the frantic searching in my youth, you know.
I know, and the striving, right? And the accumulating.
Yeah. You know, Annie, this is the time to tell you something. When you mentioned Rosalie Wright, it suddenly came back to me. Rosalie was so in love with your work. And I was at the Chronicle at the time, just started to work there to write tales. And she said, she's been compared to Mark Twain. You've got one of those reviews that's serviceable forever. I'm sure you could quote it to me.
I can. It was Shakespeare's younger sister.
Oh, that's what it was.
Younger sister. I remember being there that day with you and with John Carroll, who had his column, and Rosalie had just come on, and I didn't have a computer. I was very, very late to a computer, and somebody got the LA Times review and read it to me, and everybody, we all went crazy. And of course, then we all went out and got shit-faced drunk. Anyway, so Peggy, another thing about that the three of us share is that our whole lives have really been about reading and writing. You know, you in the Payne Knickerbocker's household as a little girl, and then a teenager, and then a hippie, and Armistead, you made it. So how old were you when Tales hit?
32.
Were you 32? You were young, yeah. So,
and I was jealous as hell of you, Andy. and I guess what I was trying to reflect on is the fact that when you're young and
I know
you want to be this thing, but you're not sure what it is. You don't know you're going to grow up to be Armistead Maupin or grow up to be Annie Lamott or Peggy Knickerbocker. You don't have an idea of what that is. So, you know, you want comparisons to Shakespeare.
Shakespeare's younger sister. I mean, I ask you, you get that one quote that you can just milk
Yeah, I got
till you're dying. After you die, it will be in the obituaries, right? And that was my quote. But Peggy, how is this book different than some of the other books you've written, the olive oil book and the simple soiree? What was the process of writing this book, this latest book, like for you?
Well, it was, I mean, it's not easy to write a cookbook, and I took it very seriously. And I tried to write a lot of stories, so I got some narrative in there because I love to write about cheesemakers. I don't care that much about chefs, but cheesemakers or vegetable growers. And then when I started writing this, it was, like telling a longer story, and I loved doing it. And this is a funny story because I got, I had one editor, Margot True, but she had another job. And then my agent at the time suggested a woman named Joyce Johnson, who had been Jack Kerouac's girlfriend. And she lived in New York and I lived here. And we kind of wrote back and forth. And really working with her was like getting a master's in writing because she was so cool. But she'd write sometimes on the side of my, page, Dullsville. And but she told me once that that you had written a review of her book. I think it was, and it wasn't a very good review. So when at one point I wrote, she said, "How do you write?" And I said, "Well, I write a shitty first draft, like I learned from Annie, we
all learned, yeah."
Yeah, and Armistead, we all write it out, and then you go back and edit. And she said, "Well, that's not how I do it." And I realized she didn't like me to do that because she didn't like you because you'd written a bad review of hers. So she said, "Well, why don't you try it my way and just do a paragraph and get it really perfect."
This is why I hate writers' gatherings. It's dangling nerve ends and jealousies and subcurrents that just make you into a wreck.
I know.
I have come to love writers individually as persons, but to go into that environment.
Oh, I know. It's why I want to tell the audience, if anybody has any questions, we are really available. Just put them on the chat and Zach will get them to us. But I quit writing reviews because, 30 years ago, I used to write a lot of reviews for, lots of different magazines and newspapers. And I realized they were all about how brilliant and well-read I am.
Yeah.
They were all somehow me showing off whether I liked the book, in which I could be effusively showing off, or if I didn't like the book, which is so easy to write a bad review, to be really sarcastic and caustic. I just hate reviewers. I mostly hate I forgot who said that a critic is someone who goes onto the battlefield after the war is over and shoots all the survivors. But that's not really what the critics are like. I got a review on the last book, not Dusk, but Almost Everything, the book on hope. And it said, well, Lamott, and this is the Chicago Tribune, which has like 500,000 readers. And it said, this book is like talking over the backyard fence with one of the Kardashians. Right?
Oh my God.
And you can't do anything. You can't say, well, not really, but, or what I want to say is, I've never heard of you. I'm not finding you on Amazon. And, but thank you for sharing. I hope you die badly. But anyway, I meant that nicely. But anyway, so, but Peggy, do you have any plans to write another book?
Well, I have an idea, but I had this book come out, and it's just been so exciting for me. It's been so well. I get letters every day, emails from people who love it. men friends of Robert's from St. Louis have loved it.
Yeah.
There is one relative who didn't like it, but everybody said he treated the family so well and all this stuff. And I was so happy. And then we were in the middle of a move and into a house from a house I adored and had lived in for 27 years. So I was torn and, but I really loved it, and I loved the response I got to this, and I love the collaboration of this book. Christopher Hersheimer, a woman who started Sever and photographed. We collaborated on lots of magazine articles for Sever and some other books, and we're very close. And she said, well, what are you doing right now? What are you going to do today? And I'd say, read, walk, make dinner. And she said, well, why don't you take that book out of the drawer? And she knows how to design books. And let's give it a whirl. Let me design it. And I already had Karen Barber's beautiful drawings. And so we just started working on it. She worked so hard. And of course, neither she nor Karen wanted anything. So I gave them a new iPhone. It was Robert's idea. But I loved it. And I loved learning how a book is put together and why she capitalized certain letters and what font she used. And she loves letters and fonts and all that stuff. And it was just such a great thing. And I self-published this book. So I've never really had say in the whole book. And it was very exciting. And she said, let's make a little work of art. And I must say, this book is like it feels so good. It's just everything. It's just a little.
Hold it up so people can see the cover. I mean, it's crazily beautiful. If you put it up in any room, it's like putting in a bouquet somewhere, bringing in roses or something like that.
And it's got real weight.
Yeah.
I'm reading a great big book right now, and it doesn't fit on my belly any place when I'm lying down reading it. And I must say, I don't know. I just love this book. So yes, I think I will, but I haven't been able to write it all. My husband keeps me so busy.
Going from room to room with him, being married together. We have a question from Ariel. Any advice for the rest of us looking for true love? And what are you each working on now? Armistead, I was going to ask you, we only have 5 minutes, but first of all, what are you working on now? And do you have any advice for the rest of us looking for true love?
I'm working on an interstitial tales novel. That is to say, it fits into the middle of the 9-volume series and involves my character Mona Ramsey, the old hippie, who ends up in a manor house at the end of Baby Cakes in England as the mistress of the manor. And so this is a novel about her and her adventures there. And I've always wanted to write, a wacky English village novel. And I can do it now. I know all these people.
Yeah.
Having said that, it hasn't been the best year for it. Lockdown hasn't been conducive to creativity.
Yeah.
Domesticity, yes. Creativity, I think I need people.
Yeah.
To get my synapses firing. And so I really had to have some discipline about it.
Yeah,
it helps when you
a
have
lot
to
of that writing energy just comes from communion with other people,
That's right.
With people and riffing with people, and you have a good conversation with someone and it starts kind of rolfing you of ideas for a passage or a setting or else it's just a great conversation you want to get down on paper. So when you're not having those, it's a real depletion. The well kind of runs a bit dry. And so what advice do you have for people longing or hoping, let's say, for love later on?
Well, I was trying to offer some advice to my sister because she said, "What I would really like is a younger man." I said, "Well, advertise for it." You know, there are men who want older women, and she was put off by that idea because it was like, I don't know, it was something weird to her about it. And I said, if we don't love what we are and put ourselves out there, we won't find anybody else that loves it either.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think some older women are just end up stymied because they don't find that thing that you and Peggy have found, which is a wonderful companion.
The best.
Someone who spends the day with you and talks to you, and that's all you really want. I mean, maybe there's some major sex going on in this little panel over here, but I don't know. Not here.
Well, you know what I felt when I was, it's what you said is true, is that you become actively and intentionally open for business,
Yeah.
It's like you let go, you let go of what you're grasping about who it has to be or what they're going to look like or whatever. And you just kind of hold your hands out and go about your business and have the most joyful, fulfilling life you can. So you're not like starving, hoping for somebody else's glass to be overflowing so you can get some of the spill off. But at the same time, I really realized years before I met Neil that what I longed for was a man who I would want to be best girlfriends with, and with most of the men I thought that I was with, I thought they're great. I like having a partner. I like, all these things we do together. But if it were a woman, it wouldn't be my best friend because she doesn't grok me at that level. We aren't soulmates. We're just like together. And so when I met Neil, I thought, even if he was a woman, I'd want to be best friends. I'd want to see him every day. I'd want to pick his brains about every movie. And Peggy, I know you and I have talked about this with you and Robert and me and Neil, that we just start jamming with them. You want to know what they're reading, what they loved at the movies, and on. You just like to jam. You want to talk with them as soon as possible every day. But
you save up things. Yeah.
Yeah. We're out of time. But Peggy, will you hold up your book again? Just hold up the title. We are so blessed. Me and Armistead have kind of sleazed our way into this hour with Peggy because we love her so much and we love the book so much. Money back guarantee. If you don't love it, I will buy it from you. So don't worry about that. And it is funny and it is wise and it is touching and it is so inspiring.
Oh,
Yes.
Annie and Peggy and Armistead, you are all so fantastic. Could we have a little chat like once a week? I'd love it. Peggy, your book is an absolute treasure. I can't say this enough. When people come into Book Passage and they see it displayed, they go, "Oh, Peggy Knickerbocker, I know her. I have Simple Soirees. Or that Rose Pistola cookbook, but I didn't know she could write." And I say, she's written all these great cookbooks and you don't know she can write? But just sit down for a minute. But what I love is your beautiful signature here.
Yeah.
I just have to again show people what a treasure they're getting when they die love later on. So
and
please
let me close by saying, if you want to get a signed copy for anyone you know who's looking for love later on, Elaine can get you a signed copy in the mail tomorrow. Just call Book Passage, go online, get it signed.
And Annie, you are my best ever cheerleader. You came to me when the pandemic and made me invite people to support us, and they did, and they're still doing it. And I actually do have some signed books by Annie as well. And Armistead, you're just going to have to come back from England soon because we miss you in person, but we're just so glad you're here. And please, everyone online, please know that all of Annie's books, all of Armistead's books, and all of Peggy's books are available at bookpassage.com. And I just loved this hour with the three of you. Thank you
Me too.
for yes.
What a great bunch of folks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aren't we lucky?
Thank you,
Thank you.
Elaine, so much.
Thank you.